I'd love to hand over the opportunity for you to speak and start this really valuable conversation on what makes being a female leader different. Over to you, Melissa.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sam. And as was mentioned, I'm Melissa Cassett. I'm a journalist. I am going to introduce myself and share a quick anecdote of why women in leadership and women mentors are so dear to my heart. And then I will have all of our panelists introduce themselves as well. So I'm a journalist. I'm now based in Lander, or as I've learned, it's called Lan Diego. I have approximately 10 years of media experience, mostly in newspapers and magazines, and most recently I served as the deputy editor for the Jackson Hole News and Guide. I made my way to Wyoming in 2015 and was part of the 2018 Womentoring cohort, and I was partnered with a woman who became one of my most trusted friends. So when I think about why these topics are so important to me and why I wanted to serve on the Womentum board and why I really am so grateful to be with all of you here today, I often think about her. At the time that I was in the Womentoring program, I was going through a period of transition, as I find myself doing again, and as many of us are doing in 2020. And she was vital in helping me navigate some pretty rough waters. She spoke truth, but she spoke it gently. She lent me her strength when mine was waning. She propped me up when I was falling down. And her sound mentorship has helped me become the leader I am today. She's one of those women who has always been in my corner, which is the type of mentor I'll forever cherish and the type of mentor I believe we all deserve. So shout out to Jen Ford if you're in the audience. And I also wanted to point out, she gave me this mama bear as a symbol of her mama bear instincts, which if you know Jen Ford is probably the most on the nose metaphor I could probably think of. That being said, mentorship is a part of our discussion today, as are many other topics pertaining to women in leadership. So let's get started. I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Gillian Chapman for a quick introduction, and then we'll go through the rest of the panel as well.
Thank you very much. My name is Gillian Chapman. I'm the proud superintendent of schools in Teton County, Wyoming. Since 2015, the duties of superintendent can be overwhelming, and it includes oversight of more than 300 board policies and responsibility for following them, and a $60 million budget. The responsibility of caring for 2,900 of the most important person or people in the lives of parents is not lost on me. I take this responsibility seriously to ensure that the social and emotional and physical well-being, as well as the academic growth of young people. And added to this responsibility is ensuring that our nearly 600 employees, as the largest full-time employer in our community, maintain employment, and that we are the employer of choice in our community. And that means not just being a great place to work, but also a great place to live and thrive with colleagues that you can trust and have a strong relationship with. I'm a proud alum of Womentum, and this was a very rewarding experience for me to support strong women in our community. And my partner, with whom I'm still in touch, gave me this little alligator that's on my desk, and it reminded me that sometimes I have to open my mouth really big and deal with its pressures, and sometimes I need to keep it shut. My two daughters also helped me keep me on my toes, both personally and professionally, despite the mistakes that I've made as a parent. I'm immensely proud of the strong women that they are, and that they've learned from their past, sometimes painful experiences by having a strong mom as a role model. A native of Kansas City, my entire family still lives there, including my husband, John. Accustomed to doing things on my own, it didn't seem like a huge risk to move to Wyoming. And it has allowed us both to continue to focus on our beliefs that public education is so important, that living apart has worked fine for us. I'm an introvert by nature, and I've learned how to be publicly on when I need to, but I prefer to not be front and center. The superintendency has caused a lot of personal sacrifice already mentioned, but I do believe that the sacrifice is well worth it. And I'm both honored and humbled to be trusted to make a difference in the lives of young people. Thank you.
Hallie, do you want to go next? And I did hear before, I'm sorry, Allie, before you speak, we are seeing that there's some technical difficulties seeing us as we're speaking, and I know Anne Marie and Sam are working on it. So we are going to continue on unless we get word from them that we should take a pause. So Allie, if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure, of course. Hello, my name is Allie Cohane. Tell you a little bit about myself. I'm actually going to read a little introduction. This is a really new space for me to speak in front of people, so thank you for your patience with me. But the panel has made me reflect on my career through a much wider lens than I'm accustomed to considering on a daily basis, for sure. In my everyday management of the 3 cafes I own and fine dining restaurant, I'm constantly shifting roles that span the spectrum of responsibility, from problem solver to strategist to graphic designer to, barista and, toilet plunger, whatever it may be. But, all this happens before 5 p.m. when I have to be home for my 3-year-old daughter, Millie. And I share every aspect of this life with my husband and business partner, Kevin. It's pretty overwhelming, but I love it. And everything I do is made possible by the incredible people I work with. And I know we'll be reflecting a lot on what it is to be a leader, but I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and graduated from New Trier High School. And I left home to become an art history major at Colorado College. Fell in love with the West, and as most people did, said I would come for a year to ski and stay. And all the while growing up and here skiing, I was working in the restaurant industry to make money. And lucky enough, met my husband, Kevin, while working at the Blue Lion, who was then a line cook and I was a server. I worked my way up to the Snake River Grill and decided to leave the restaurant industry to pursue my college degree in art history and manage the Taylor Piggott Gallery. In 2010, Kevin, my husband, and I moved to Paris, where he could attend Cordon Bleu and I could study language. And after that adventure, we returned to my home, Chicago, so I could get a second degree in graphic design from Columbia College. And then we returned, always with our sights set on Jackson, to open a bakery. Returned in 2011, where we opened our first venture, the Commercial Bakery. And it was this point in between launching the Commercial Bakery and opening our first cafe that I got to participate in the Womentoring program, which is an experience I continue to reference. And this is thanks to my mentor, Joan Anselmo. Shout out to you. She was wonderful. And after participating and with Joan's help, I was able to open our first cafe downtown Jackson. Since then, we have expanded, opened up Picnic, another cafe in Jackson, another Persephone Bakery on the West Bank, and most recently, our newest fine dining concept, Colette, opened at the end of the summer. The entire time, my husband has been running the Commercial Bakery while I manage every aspect of the cafes. I do the design of interiors, I train new staff, I build menus, all trying to elevate the experience for the customer. And that's where I will leave it. From my lovely gift from Joan that I do not have with me, but I keep sacred on my bookshelf in my office, is a 4-leaf clover. And I think it's a really important gift to remember that sometimes luck is involved in success as well. So I very much appreciate everything she did for me.
Thank you, Allie. We will have Jody go next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Pond, and I am the director of Teton County Health Department. And you probably have seen more of me than you've ever seen in the last 7 years of me running the department. I moved here just over 7 years ago from Salt Lake City, where I had been at the Utah Department of Health for over 20 years. And then prior to that, I had spent about 10 years in California in local public health. So I have a long career in public health, over 30 years. And Unfortunately, I thought I would end my career without having any kind of major pandemic occur, but that didn't happen. So here we all are, dealing with this pandemic that none of us wanted, and leading the community through this. It has been challenging, of course, but we've had such great partnerships in the community, the town and the county, and business partners, the chamber, the school district. I mean, I can't name everyone, but it's been a group effort. It's what community means to me. That's one of the questions we ask our applicants. What does community mean to you when somebody is applying for a job here? And it's really interesting to hear people's answer to that question. But literally what we've done as a community and what we still need to do is what community is about. I entered into public health as an undergrad, and then deciding where I was going to go from there, whether I took the LSAT and applied to law school and to public health school. So two very different career paths, but really my heart is in public health. Obviously, I've stayed in it for 30 years. And really the underlying factor is that I believe that healthcare is a human right, and that we all deserve to be healthy and to attain the best possible health that we can. Some people need more help, and one of the things I did when I first came here was we did a community health needs assessment, and based on that needs assessment, at the center of everything is health equity. And in our community, some of our community members need more help than others. And we at the health department are the safety net in many cases for our community. We have built an amazing team here at the health department. I think the 7 years before the pandemic came was all in preparation for what we've been able to achieve as a team here. The glue was so strong that everything that you threw at us, everything the virus threw at us, has not been able to break that bond. And we are still in the fight. We're not giving up. We don't want to throw in the towel, even as bad as things look today. So just a little bit about me personally. I have 2 children. A son in college and a daughter who will be going back to grad school here in the next year or so. And I'm married, and there's just so much to say about my children. And one of the things I wanted to show, I guess this is showing our little totems that this is an armadillo. And it's hard to see, but there's a little baby on top of this little mama here. It actually opens. But my aunt gave me this years and years ago when I was a single mom, raising 2 kids on my own, obviously with help from a lot of people. But this was, they're tough. Their shell is so tough. And she gave me this, and it's been on my desk ever since. And I look at it every day and think, how tough we all are in this world, whatever comes your way. So that's been sort of my mantra, is just to try to be as tough as I can on the outside when things are tough. That's kind of my leadership style, is showing everybody that we as women can do it. And that's about it. So thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Jody. And Susan, you will be our last introduction for the panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and tuning in out there, and have to confirm everything Jody said about the health department and the amazing women there. I've been able to work with them closely, which has been incredible. And Allie, I did not know you were a fellow Tiger from Colorado College, so go Tigers. I've had a varied and organic career, a lot of twists and turns. I'm currently the community engagement specialist for the town of Jackson. But I've led programs, communications development, and a number of nonprofits here in Jackson, including the Community Foundation of Jackson Home. before ending up here more permanently in Jackson due to my partner's job, which is how we ended up here. I was a professor of English and creative writing for about a decade and actually moved from Kelly, Wyoming to Hong Kong for a professorship for 2 years. So that was pretty dramatic. And after the culture shock subsided, we were first put at one of the busiest intersections in the entire world. It was our housing from Kelly to that. So that was dramatic, but it was really fascinating. So grateful that I took that leap and have done a lot of pivoting within my career. And that's really helped, I think, so many times to help me consider kind of what I miss about things I might have done in the past and things that I don't miss at all and are glad that aren't part of my days any longer. So that's what the variety can help you achieve. My experience with the momentum was, I think, in 2015. I'm trying to get the date. Is when I recently moved back here more permanently, and the network and connections that provide are just really incredible. I have Amy Fulweiler as my mentor. I'm not sure she's out there, but hi if you are. And we ended up working together at the community school too, which was pretty neat. One additional thing, if folks are tuning in from outside of Teton County, I also, in my varied background, have worked at a ranch in Farston, Wyoming, and ran a youth development program in Gillette. So my love for and interest in the entirety of the Equality State runs deep, and just shout out to everyone out there.
Thank you, Susan. I just learned so much about the panelists. I thought I knew you all pretty well, but I just learned a lot. A quick explainer of how this is going to work. The first half of the program, I'll be asking questions, and the second half is dedicated to audience questions. As Sam mentioned, within Zoom, the bottom right of your screen, you should see a Q&A button. If you want to submit questions, you can actually do it at any time. I just want to make you aware we're not going to be answering them until the second half. But let's get started so that we can hear from our amazing panel. So my first question has to do with the term woman leader. Specifically, is being a woman leader different than being a leader? Is it worthwhile using this qualifier? Why or why not? And Gillian, I'm going to send this first one to you.
Thank you. You know, I'd like to think it's not different, but it probably is. I find it interesting as well. Right now, a lot of signature lines include whether or not you refer to yourself as she or her. So I think it is different. As a female, I find myself balancing a lot of things at once beyond my work as a leader. For example, when I was a single parent, when my kids were little and they were sick or had activities, I had to balance my work schedule to accommodate these challenges. You know, what was for dinner? Is the laundry done? Where were my kids going for summer camp or days when school was closed but I had to work? I was fortunate to have my parents and my grandparents to help out, and because of that, my daughters are also fortunate to have built and forged a strong relationship with grandparents and great-grandparents. So this is a great example of how a deficit could be turned into an asset. I had some bosses, generally males, who were completely oblivious and unsympathetic to these realities, while I had other bosses and other leaders around me, again, typically female, who understood that it was a part of life that I really couldn't push aside. So it was generally assumed that female leaders get that. And this shaped me because of these personal experiences as a mom, while also being a leader. I believe that I am very understanding of these pressures that our staff bring with them every day, and I aim to provide an atmosphere where our staff know that I'm going to support them and believe that families should come first. I just want to share another brief example. When I was interviewing early in my career to be a principal, I was young, so it was a while ago, but I was coached that I needed to be very clear that when I was answering questions, that in addition to being caring, kind, organized, a good listener, which this person was coaching me characterized as female traits, that I also had to demonstrate that I could be tough, that I would be direct without being too assertive, and clear that I would be able to manage a large budget adeptly, because those were traits generally assigned to male principals. So I'd like to think the stereotype has changed. I'm not necessarily sure that it has, but I think that's a pretty good example where male and female leadership and characterizations or generalizations have been applied, and I think they probably still are applicable today.
Absolutely. Are there other panelists who'd like to chime in on this question?
I can. I think it is different because it's still not, it hasn't been and still not entirely the standard for women to be leaders. Before last week's election, only 16% of Wyoming's legislature is female, and that went down. So that's less than a quarter of the leadership governing our state, which means women who are there are navigating a space differently than the men just by sheer numbers. And I think people that hold identities that have been in the margins have to be scrappy, innovative, resilient. Not that others don't, but that we all need to do that even more, and determined to achieve maybe the same things that others don't have to work quite as hard to. So I believe overall female leaders have really well-earned discernment and wisdom from going through what they do to achieve what they do.
Okay, thank you both. Switching gears just a little bit, there has been a lot of discussion about the differences between how men and women lead and how those differences pave the way to success or failure. Jody, with decades of experience in healthcare and currently serving as the director of the Teton County Health Department, what are your thoughts and observations on the differences between man and women leaders?
Thank you. So public health really is dominated by women and in the profession. And last night, as I was reading through some of these questions and just gathering some thoughts, I was thinking, I think I've only had one male boss in my entire 30-year career, which is pretty remarkable. So it really is, for me, public health is a little bit different. I haven't been in a corporate setting or something like that, so I don't have that experience, but I will expand on what Gillian said about your lived experience as a woman, as a single mom who juggled career and kids and, trying to move up through the ladder of government, where there was a time I had to go part-time so that I could make my kids more of a priority in terms of time, and passed up quite a few opportunities to move up. And I think that really, for me, men, that would be something that men wouldn't be looking at doing, is making, the sacrifice of saying, well, I choose my kids over my career. And so when I became the health director here, I had a couple of nurses who were pregnant and they had no childcare. There was a long wait list in the community. And I was fortunate enough to have my mom and dad take care of my kids while I was working. But a lot of young people that move here don't have immediate families. So we started a daycare here at the health department, employee-run daycare. We gave up our waiting room and allowed them to create an LLC so that their kids could be nearby, so they could breastfeed throughout the day and be with their kids. So I think that lived experience is something that I've seen in women's leadership that's different.
Thank you so much. This next question is for Susan. Having just celebrated a year leading community engagement and strategy for the town of Jackson, can you share a bit about your experience as a woman leader directing the voice and engagement of an entire municipality?
Yeah, absolutely. It has been quite a year. I literally shared with Melissa that this is my weekend, or it's been a year this week that I've been with the town and COVID hit. pretty early into that, but I have luckily really felt like I am in the right place and able to make major contributions, which has been just fabulous. Really enjoying this role, which was pretty new when I took it. And, you know, I have a colleague at the town who's referenced that this year has really been like floating in the ocean, and waves just keep coming at us. We're just waiting for the next wave. And it's been an amazing team working, as I said, with the health department to be dealing with those crashes together. And working on engagement and strategy, I've really tried to emphasize the need to respond rather than simply react, and differentiate there as taking the time. It might not be as instantaneous as a reaction, but response will be more thoughtful, will be ideally the best crafted. It's been pretty fascinating, the things I've learned that I never thought I would: sewage, pipes, state politics, working with the county's emergency response management team early on responding to COVID, which obviously we're still very much in the throes of, and we just mobilized very quickly when it first arrived here, with all sorts of communication. And, you know, Rich Oakes there from the start was always pointing out that a pandemic is as much an information crisis as a medical crisis. So there was a lot of need for websites, ad campaigns, signs, banners, the updates that both Jody and Gillian are on weekly these days, so thank them for that. And there is one this afternoon, actually. But yeah, I think what's been amazing also has just been the community coordination and cooperative effort with the groups meeting about food insecurity, mental health, housing issues, childcare. So many groups coming together to make the best response for our community overall. And there are tiny examples of being in town hall when some of the early orders were coming out before we got the state on board to have a more community-wide order. We had ordinances from the town, and we were crafting our town attorney was crafting the exemptions and what's considered essential. And I was able to, from information that I had being a part of these other groups, convey what was needed. Quarantine cuisine comes to mind as something that, you know, food delivery was potentially going to be something that wasn't permitted. And I was able to tell our town attorney, no, that's something that we are working on in this moment. And people still to this day are able to get food delivered when they're needing to isolate and quarantine. So I think a lot of that just connection and coordination has been a huge part of this year for me and the response. And it's been very amazing to be a part of this community for all of it and through all of it.
Speaking of the pandemic, Jody, I was wondering if we could circle back to you for just a moment, and if you could share your thoughts on what you've seen as far as a difference in how men and women leaders have led through the pandemic.
Sure, Melissa. I don't know if any of you had read any of these articles, but lots of people were sending them to me in the early days about the difference between men and women leaders of various countries. Women leaders were doing better in terms of handling the pandemic and the numbers and whatnot. And so I started following that literature for the last 6 months or so. And so it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of whether or not that's, you know, a true, there are some that are peer reviewed and published studies that certain countries that are led by women are doing better. And the things that were interesting to look at were women were more likely in the beginning to do shutdowns earlier. And what that really translated into was that women were more willing to take a risk with the economy and not with people's lives. So shutting down sooner meant less infection and less lives lost. And they've now, like Taiwan as an example, hadn't had a case in, I don't know, a couple hundred days, a couple weeks ago. I haven't looked at the data lately, but you know, that proved to be effective, was those early shutdowns, and when we didn't know a lot about the virus. So you know, they looked at it from a human cost, and men looked at it from an economic cost. And I think that's really an interesting lens that women bring.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that perspective. I wanted to ask a question about role models, though the way I'm kind of getting into it is, as Susan noted, women remain underrepresented in politics, though women did make some historic moves in this recent election. On a state level, U.S. Senator Cynthia Lummis was elected, and nationally, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. So with that, there's been a lot of talk about the importance of women role models. Who were your role models growing up, and how did they influence your choices? And I'm going to field to Allie first for this question.
Of course. And this was a really tough question for me. I don't necessarily have a succinct answer. And it was really dynamic throughout my life, depending on what I was doing and what my goals were. First and foremost, obviously, both my parents, my mom and my dad, were incredible role models to me in the sense that they always instilled, the importance of education and emotional intelligence, frankly, alongside the fact that I could do whatever I wanted. So I got started off on a great foot in terms of having parents that were encouraging no matter what it was that I was looking to do. They were there to support me. As I went through college, I focused a lot I had a lot of female professors in the art history department. They were actually all female professors. And I was able to look to a lot of the artists who broke barriers in the things that I was studying and use them as role models. At that point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into a creative field, if I wanted to pursue art history. But as I moved towards starting my own company, running my own business, and actually being in the Jackson community, my most impactful mentors were my boss is Taylor Piggott, who runs Taylor Piggott Gallery. Seeing her and what she was able to do in a definitely male-dominated field gave me courage, and she was an incredible empathetic leader, and was a person like me who was hardworking and smart and tough, but at the same time incredibly open and vulnerable when she needed to be. And so she gave me a lot of courage that I could do this in this community as well. And I have wonderful people, Nona Yahia from Guide Architects, who runs Vertical Harvest as well. We have some amazing women leaders that have not only just been there as mentors, but have supported me. So I look to our community currently as my mentors, less so, but it is amazing to see in our elections what has happened.
Any other panelists want to speak to that question? Who were your role models and why?
I'll go. My role models were my mom and my grandmother. And my grandmother, because she had to drop out of school in 8th grade and to raise a family, to raise her siblings. And she had to raise a young family while my grandfather was in World War II. No education, no money, no resources nearby. She figured out she was resilient, she was courageous, she figured out how to raise, an infant and a 2-year-old all on her own, which was pretty remarkable. And my mom also, because she wasn't jealous of this best friend relationship that I forged with my grandmother. And the things that my grandmother taught me, one is I loved her so much that if I ever thought of doing anything bad, I thought to myself, would I want to tell my grandmother this? And if the answer was no, and I remember to think of the question first, I didn't do it. And she had that much of an influence on me. The second thing she taught me was to be courageous and to be kind. And those are the things that I carry with me every day. And every day I wear some piece of jewelry or something of hers to remind me, be courageous and be kind. So I think that what she lived through in her lifetime makes what I'm going through today and what we're going through today seem to pale in comparison.
Thank you. This next question, I'm actually going to look to Susan first, but I invite all the panelists to chime in. When it comes to the forward progress of women in leadership, how has the leadership landscape changed over the course of your career? How far have we come, and how much more work do we have to do?
Yeah, this is echoing. This is a hard one for me to answer, but I see leadership as a willingness to go first, to take responsibility, hold authority, and also very committed to helping others get where they need to go. And I think more and more women are doing all of these things. I think also, speaking to what both Gillian and Jody have referenced, I think women have always done those things. It just might have been more in a domestic sphere, but maybe are doing all these things more and more in public spaces, and have to overcome a lot to do so. And I've worked with and for plenty of women. I do think there are generational differences in terms of this question. Thinking to the last question, but my mother's definitely one of my mentors, and as she was pursuing a master's, she was pregnant and had to not let people know she was pregnant for a good part of that. And that was not that long ago. That was in the 60s. You weren't permitted to be in school and be pregnant. So just obstacles that women have gone through. I have so much gratitude for generations that have come before me. What they had to take on to succeed. So I think definitely things have shifted in small ways, even during my career. I think double standards have come up already, and women are judged differently, and that can be incredibly challenging. You know, a woman can, being seen as ambitious might be negative, whereas a man would be praised for that same thing. A woman is cold and aloof, a man might be composed and introspective, like those double sides of the same coin. But yeah, I think that certainly things have changed a lot, and there's still a lot of work to do to get closer to equity.
Do our other panelists want to chime in on this one as well?
I will. So kind of going back to the role model question, of course, last night when I put some notes down, I listed my parents, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about, like, I feel like another area of just role models is my generation of women. And so regardless of your politics, the fact that we have a vice president who is of my same age is incredible for me as a woman leader. And so I think about my daughter and her generation, and in her early 20s, she gets to see a vice president who's a woman, a very strong woman. And that was just, I thought, that's my generation, and this is what we've achieved. So in terms of historic things that have happened in the last week, that for me was really something I've reflected on quite a bit.
That provides a nice transition for the next question, which I'd like to field to Gillian. Can you speak to the impact on children and youth seeing more, quote, leaders who look like me?
Oh, I think it provides hope, especially for those who may have been disenfranchised or marginalized in the past. I think it's natural to gravitate towards people with similar backgrounds, experiences, or people that look like me. Early in my career, I remember seeing that there were some teachers that were next door to me. They had already gotten their graduate degrees. They'd been teaching for a long time. They were making so much more money than I was. And I was working so hard, and I was thinking, okay, if they can do this, so can I. I can hang in there. So I think it's natural to gravitate toward people that are like you, finding people where you feel like you fit in. So yeah, I think it's important for students to feel like they have people they can look up to. These shared experiences and are really important. But I also think it's important that role models and people who look like me, they may not look like me, but role models can be seen every day, not just in leadership positions. And I hope that our kids are mindful and that they notice, and that we're teaching them to be mindful and to notice when someone opens the door for an elderly person, or when witnessing when someone thanks a veteran for their service. I think if you look hard enough, you see leadership in everyone. They may not look like you, but you can still aspire to be like them. And likewise, you can aspire to not be like them. They might look like you and they might be behaving in a way that you can't support. So that's another great example. They might look like me, but I don't want to be like them. So I think it goes both directions.
Thank you. Any other panelists who want to chime in on that topic? Okay, then our next question. When it comes to barriers and uphill battles, what has been the most significant one in your career and why? Allie, I am going to direct that one to you.
Great. Yes, thinking back to when we were going to start our business 9 years ago at this point, it's a little different being an entrepreneur. I was essentially creating my own playing field where I got to be in charge. So, but before I could do that, I needed help, I needed money, I needed advice. And I went to the town of Jackson. They have some free resources, which are wonderful for people starting businesses. I consulted lawyers, I consulted friends who had run businesses themselves, all of whom now, when I reflect back on it, were older men. And I was told by everybody that this was not a good idea. We already had plenty of coffee shops, we had bakeries, and was essentially met with a lot of resistance. And so for me, the biggest challenge was really finding the self-confidence in my vision and my idea, because essentially I moved forward, without the people that I had been told were the people that would tell me if this would work, could help me build this. I had to move forward, with only my support from, first of all, the women who were mentoring were amazing, because this is when we were building my cafe. This is not the bakery itself, but essentially my resources and my positivity and my belief in myself. And had I not taken that leap, none of this would have happened. So that was definitely the biggest challenge.
Do any other women on the panel want to share what their biggest challenge was and why? Then moving from this question, Allie, I have another question for you. Knowing what you know now, if you could start over, what would you do different? I start over every time I open a new shop, so hopefully I'm doing things different each time and improving. But when it comes down to it, and I look at myself earlier on in my career, and I think I believed and felt that the best way to be a woman boss in a male-dominated restaurant industry was to be more like a man, to emulate some of the bosses that I had that were frankly unempathetic, very strong, very tough bosses. And so when I first set out to open Persephone the Cafe, I ran my business much like businesses that I had worked for in the past, that were run by very strong men. But I would say the thing that I learned the most, and what was crucial, was that as I
worked with different managers and grew my business and listened to my employees, the best thing I could do was embrace the things that made me me, which were frankly vulnerability. I'm the first one to admit I don't know what I'm doing a lot of the time, and I'm willing to take a collaborative, creative approach to problems. So I have brought in a lot of voices, a lot of wonderful people. In terms of what I've been able to do, it's because of those wonderful women that I work with that I've reached where I am, and embracing creativity for solutions as well. I think I was sometimes afraid, thinking these things will look feminine, I need to be stronger than this, I need to look like this, but really embracing the, perhaps maybe feminine traits that I have that have in the end, I believe, led to my success. So not essentially defining what I should look like or who I should be to get to the top, but really knowing myself and trusting in myself and hopefully, taking me to the next level.
Sort of piggybacking on that, I have a question about the most important attributes of successful leaders today, and if gender plays a role in that. And I was hoping Gillian could answer that question.
Sure. I believe honesty, empathy, being a good listener, being courageous, having a growth mindset, reflective, willing to fail forward, being a strong communicator, being tough and resilient. I think these are important for any leader. And I think it's important to be self-aware, as gender can certainly play a role in this. For example, this morning, as I was thinking about this panel this afternoon, I was also tuning into the governor's press release. And he is clearly highly concerned about our state and the well-being of citizens. And in his passionate pleas, he referred to some Wyomingites as knuckleheads. He became pretty agitated, almost yelling at times. And I found myself wondering how his remarks would have been received if it were me saying that and almost yelling. So I think if you're yelling, you're crying, you're expressing frustration, these are all natural parts of being human, being female, being male. However, self-control is really important. And the lack of it, no matter what the gender, can be detrimental to the success of any organization, and it erodes the trust. I think probably one of the things that have made, I was thinking about what Jody said, that the places where females were making the decisions about the virus early on, and they made early on decisions. I almost wonder if that has to do with relationships. And, it's harder to be critical or to lack trust in someone when you know them. And, when you have a relationship with someone, it's a lot easier to just support the direction they're going and have faith and trust because you know that person and that relationship. And I think sometimes some women are really adept at developing those relationships and that sense of trust. So again, I think those attributes are important, whether you're male or female. It's just a matter of how it's interpreted sometimes by others.
Any other thoughts from our panelists on that topic?
I think building on what I heard Allie's talking about, that authenticity is really a huge aspect for leadership, that the more authentic you are to yourself and your own way of going about things, the more that's going to come across and resonate with whoever you're working with and for. And
great. This, I think, will be our last question from me, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. We've gotten a few questions already. If you are thinking about something or have been thinking about something, please throw it in our Q&A and we'll hopefully get to it. So our last question from me for the panel, which I will start with Jody, but I think I'd love to hear from every panelist on this one. Looking back on your career, what advice would you give to the next generation of female leaders?
Okay. Um, so I think in looking back at my career, one of the things that I have noticed over time is that there's this scarcity mentality that women have in leadership, that there's one spot at the table. And if you get that spot at the table, you bring up the drawbridge behind you. And I would like to change that way of thinking and say there are many spots at the table for all of us. There are so many great women leaders out there. And so one of the things that I have done throughout my career is mentor young women in particular, because as I said, I have had men work in the health department, believe it or not, and men work in public health. But just being, one of the things that I love the most is the ability to have interns in our workplace. And mostly that happens in the summer. And what's been so amazing over the years is to watch where they go. They go on to get PhDs in public health. They go on to work at other health departments around the world and the country. They go to work at CDC. They go to work in our government. And, you know, I keep in touch with a lot of those interns that I've had over the years. And they're now grown and have children of their own. And it's just so exciting. The most recent one was we took her as an undergrad, which is usually we take people as in their master's program, but we took a chance and said, sure, come on and work for us. She worked a summer and ended up graduating and then going to Johns Hopkins to get her master's in public health. And she's spending this year working at the Boston Health Department and doing just great. And so she's going to be back in Jackson over the winter. So I look forward to saying hi. So I think, you know, just that ability that we can reach out our hand and give a hand up is really important. And we have to do it more intentionally. And then just going back to the beginning of this discussion is just being a voice for childcare, for flexible schedules, for things that are different for women in the workplace. And I hope that I've done that in this position. Thank you.
I'd love to ask that same question of our other panelists, maybe starting with Allie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to echo what Jody said. I think it's super important to recognize that there are many spots at the top, and being competitive is crucial to rising to the top. But at the same time, I feel like I've gotten where I am because of supportive women who have helped me along the way. And I feel like I owe that as well, the collaborative aspect of what I do and the embracing of the community of women that I work with, I think has really made me successful. So I think that's crucial for sure. But I do also, one sort of more personal thing I would tell the next generation, as I have a lot of 20-something-year-old strong, amazing women working for me, is that don't beat yourself up. Don't criticize yourself. We are in a world where it's very hard to do it all. I know, being a mother of a 3-year-old child and running 4 businesses at the same time, and a household and pets and a family and all of this. And, you know, I think I've spent too much of my life and energy criticizing myself why I haven't been better at this and why I can't do what this mom does, and at the same time I can't do what this man does in his job, and rather than looking at the can't do's, really embrace what you can do until things change. Yeah, I just in preparing for this was given a really wonderful article by Anne-Marie Slaughter that is titled "Why Women Can't Have It All," and she really just addresses that it's not necessarily valuing women on male terms, but really changing the way we look at choices for men and women in general. And I do believe truly that until workplaces are changed, maybe school schedules, policies, our culture, it's going to be a challenge. And the best thing you can do as a woman who is also a mother who has a household is give yourself a pat on the back for tackling it all, even when you maybe aren't able to give 100% in any one area.
Gillian, your thoughts on the same question?
I echo Jody and Allie said it great. Find ways to lift other women up. It's not pie. You don't have to share your piece of it, so go for it. There's no calories in it. I think I'd go back to what my grandmother taught me: be courageous, be kind, and find ways to lift each other up, and being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And sometimes I think as a perfectionist, sometimes perfection can get in the way of doing anything, and no decision is still a decision. So, be okay with it's not perfect, but go for it, and give it a try. You'll get it. I'm a firm believer, if you don't do something right or something goes wrong, you're gonna get a second chance to get it right. So don't be afraid of that. Failure is a great opportunity to learn, and look at it as a learning opportunity instead of letting that self-defeating talk come in. Just go for it. Keep swinging at that bat, and sometimes you're going to strike out. But boy, when you hit a home run, it sure feels good.
And Susan, we'll end on this question on you. What advice would you give to the next generation of women leaders?
Sure. Related to what everyone has said, I think really echoing it, I've recently reread Stacey Abrams' book, Lead from the Outside, which I highly recommend. There are gems throughout it. But one thing that's echoing what everyone has said is a quote from her that never tell yourself no, let someone else do it. So I feel like in the first part of my career, when I was a professor, I was always talking to students about this critics in their head in terms of writing and writing past it. And as women, as people with marginalized identities, we go out into the world with these critics in our head. They can be very loud, and society will confirm them often because that's where they're coming from in the first place. And we will likely be the first, at some point in our lives, the first woman to be in a certain role, first gay woman to work at such and such organization. And we have to tell ourselves yes, to work past those critics and banish them, because there's enough out there already saying that to us. So I think, yeah, just don't tell yourself no, and go out and try.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for answering my questions. I'm now going to turn it over to our audience questions. And the first question I'd like to start with is, I think we'll field this one to Jody. So when your position requires you to make strong recommendations or provide executive direction, roughly what % of the time do you feel you're heard versus second guessed or doubted?
Good question. Just this week, we have a great team. It's not just me making decisions. We have Dr. Travis Rydell is our health officer, and he and I speak multiple times a week. We have to always be in constant contact, and a lot of this, the heat gets put onto him, and but this week I was saying to him, I feel like a broken record, where that stereotype of a woman that's just constantly saying the same thing, and it's just a naggy voice versus somebody of authority that's saying it. And I caught myself, we were trying to figure out who was going to say something at a particular thing. And I'm like, oh, why don't you do it? You're more authoritative because you have an MD, right? And then I had to say, no, I have as much authority as you have, years of experience, and I know what I'm talking about. But, you know, those critics that we talked about just a minute ago of like, oh, well, you're just this naggy voice that the community's tired of hearing from. Or the example that Gillian gave, I did watch the news conference as well. It was kind of shocking to see the governor kind of a little really heated. But I thought the same thing, like a woman couldn't do that because she would be labeled, you know, he could be aggressive, but we can't be. So yeah, it's definitely a fine balance that I find myself in at all times.
Sort of piggybacking off of that response, and this question I'm going to pop over to Gillian. Along your way to your ascent to leadership, how did you navigate working with your male colleagues or bosses who may have felt threatened by your competence? Do you have any tips or tricks for working with males or others who may feel insecure as a result of your presence and awesomeness?
I say that's a general comment to all awesome females. I got to tell you, it was tough. I'll just be fully honest. I've worked for highly destructive, misogynistic men that wanted to destroy me, put me in positions where I had no choice but to do what they told me to do. And I mean, it was devastating for me. So I had to make some sacrifices, and you learn what works and what doesn't. Being assertive, you know, that didn't work for me. You know, I was a bitch. I was too out there. I was, you know, all these labels. And so I had to figure out what worked for me and what I could live with personally. Sometimes it is sitting back and listening and taking it in. And then, like, I worked for one boss that I had to clear the pathway ahead of him and clear the pathway behind him because it was so destructive. But that was the only way we could get it done. And, you know, some other bosses, I had to say, oh, yes, what a brilliant idea, and find ways to give them the brilliant idea and then go pat them on the back, because that was the only way we were going to get through. So yeah, it was tough. I had to really learn, and I made some incredible mistakes along the way where I didn't know myself well enough. And I guess the biggest thing that I learned is if you cannot abide by someone's leadership style or the way they are not going to change. And there's nothing you can do to change them. All you can do is change yourself. And all you can do is to do what you think is going to be the best for the organization, and try to be courageous and to be kind in the way you do it. But at some point you have to figure out this isn't going to work. Their leadership style isn't going to change. That person is not going to change. So I have to decide what's, you know, what can I live with? What can I go to sleep with at night? And if it's not that kind of style, then move on, because there's someplace else that will best benefit from your approach and your leadership.
Thank you. This next question is: the imposter syndrome, especially for rising women leaders, has come up a lot in Momentum mentor-mentee discussions this fall. Have any of you experienced this? And if so, what tools or methods have you employed to push through that feeling? And I'm open to whichever panelist would like to field that one.
I could take a stab at it. When I first taught at the university level as a graduate student, so I was like just a couple of years out of college and already teaching, so I had major imposter syndrome. And I think I went maybe the opposite direction, like I seemed too cool, because I always have this in my head that one of my first the assessment after, a student said that I seemed blasé and aloof. And I was just so frightened, I think, but somehow I like made it seem like I didn't care. Yeah, I think so many times it is just kind of fake it till you make it with imposter syndrome in my life. And you're presenting what you can and trying to learn as much as you can on your feet. And I think actually women are pretty adept at that.
I'm going to piggyback on that just a little bit. One of the things I wish I would have figured out early on is it is okay to not know, because you're curious, you're still learning. And early on when I was a principal, I had to call a parent and tell them that their child didn't do something that was so great. And it was an uncomfortable conversation. And the dad started to hang up and he said, "By the way, you sound too damn young to be telling me that my kid can't come back to school." And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to have to sound older. But it's okay to be curious and to have a beginner's mindset, because some of the most brilliant ideas that we've put in place have come from not having an expertise in that area. Looking at it from a beginner's eye instead of an expert's eye, the creativity and the things that we've been able to accomplish have all come because we went, I don't know that much about it, but here are my thoughts, or what do you think about that? So I think not necessarily being an imposter, but approaching things from how can we do this differently? How can we do this better? What hasn't worked? What has worked? And what are your great ideas? Even though you may not be an expert, what ideas do you have? And that collective thinking and mindset makes a difference.
We've had a few questions about perception. So I'm going to ask a question having to do with perception and how to combat some negative perception. This question is, advocating for oneself can often earn you the label of being difficult or complaining. Do any of you have experience or advice related to this? And I think I'm going to choose Jody for this one, but anyone is welcome to chime in after she responds.
Sure. I think we're pretty vocal here at the health department. And sometimes we get labeled, like you said, as being complainers or something like that. And, it kind of baffles me a bit because if you can't question the status quo, then how are we ever going to see change? And so I'll go back to flexible schedules or needing childcare, being vocal about what we need in our jobs, in our personal lives is really important. And so there will be people that are your critics, but I think if you believe in something that is really worthwhile, then those critics are just critics, and you live another day to do the work that you believe in. So we try not to put much, we listen, but we also try not to, we have enough to deal with that critical people aren't part of that equation.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that question? So this,
well,
go ahead.
It would be pretty quick response, but I've certainly had that advocating for oneself seen as negative. I don't know it's always worked, but I've tried in those instances to demonstrate simultaneously the value that I might be bringing to a situation or group.
For this next question, I'm going to field it to Allie. What are your behind the scenes tricks for being a great leader? What does your self-care routine look like?
Tricks. I don't know if I necessarily have tricks, but I found what has been most successful for me as a leader in creating a team of people that feel like family, that love each other and want to work hard for each other and problem solve for each other is really listening and communicating. I don't think I quite realized running a cafe would be as much of a sort of job as it is for a psychologist as it is for a person running a restaurant. But I feel like sitting down and listening and caring and empathizing and taking in maybe what is outside of the work spectrum with my employees has really helped me grow a community where there is trust and there is respect. So, you know, it may seem as though those aren't the nuts and bolts of running a successful restaurant, but at the same time, I have found that being an empathetic leader and using my emotional intelligence has really helped me create the team that has built what we have built together, for sure. And when it comes to self-care, I'm still working on that one. Still trying to find a little bit of balance for myself. You know, having my daughter really was eye-opening and changing in a way that, you know, now at 5 o'clock, a lot of the time I say, you know, I can get to this tomorrow. I didn't used to do that. I didn't really know what a weekend was. Friday night didn't matter. It was all about work. So she really helped me there, but that is still, you know, giving of myself. I need to focus on it. It is my detriment that I don't focus on myself a bit more. So if anybody has advice as to how to incorporate health, self-care, I'd love to hear it.
I run every day. And a lot of times people see me running and they go, oh, I saw you walking. No, I was running. And I stick to that. I'm not a great runner. I'm not doing it for anyone. And I love when people ask me if I want to run with them, but the answer is always going to be no. That is the time where it's like my mindfulness. I get really interesting ideas and creative ideas. And I recently got a puppy, and she is awesome, and I'm madly in love with my puppy. And she gets to come with me. And so I think those are some things. The other thing that I've tried to do, I do work a lot of hours because I can. I don't have children at home. I don't have a family at home. And so it's a time in my life where I can do that. I choose to do it. But I do try, if I work, I always have to work on the weekends for some reason or another, but I try to, if I have some work I know I'm going to need to do on Saturday or emergency pops up, then I don't work Sunday. So I try to take Saturday or Sunday completely off. I mean, I'll look at my email, but I try not to actually work. So I think that's an important boundary that I'm also doing and explicitly saying out loud to the staff and to my friends and my family so that they hold me accountable for it. And also they realize it shows that you're an empathetic leader, that you want them to have balance, and that you're willing to sacrifice as well and put some boundaries in place so that they do the same thing. I don't, even though I might be up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't want to send a message that other people should be up and responding to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I want to be really clear about that with the staff, that it's important for them to have a healthy balance and to maintain healthy connections with friends and colleagues and their family, and to be fully present when they aren't working, be fully present. And that's something that I constantly work on, is being fully present.
I'd like to add a little bit to that too. I mean, I think, you know, we've had to work really long hours here at the health department throughout the pandemic. And in the spring when the gyms closed down and the weather was terrible, it was hard to, you know, maintain an exercise routine. But early in May, my daughter called me and said, let's run the Jackson Hole Half Marathon in September. And I immediately signed up that day because I knew that if I put that on my schedule, I never show up to a race start line without being prepared. So I made the time this summer to leave the office and go home and run and have dinner with my husband, and then I could do some work later. But one of the things that I, really have stressed throughout my career is making sure staff are doing the same things, that they feel that they can leave and go do an exercise class at noon, or somebody was doing a virtual Pilates class in our boardroom yesterday at lunchtime. Just giving people that permission that they think that they don't have, to take time out for themselves. And it's so important in terms of self-care. The exercise for me is what keeps me sane. And I'm the same way. I'm not a fast runner, but I love it nonetheless.
Faster than me on the couch over here. We had a follow-up question, and there's been a couple of questions along these lines. So I wanted to get this question out there. And it's piggybacking on a question about working with strong men. This one has to do with strong women. What about working with strong women who don't want you to cut into their, quote, piece of the pie? Do you have any advice? And Gillian, you mentioned the pie, so I am going to field to you first.
Build a relationship with them and find ways to build them up. When I was thinking about the superintendency, I was told to look for a board. The Board of Education actually hires superintendents. Look for a board that doesn't have females on it, because you're more apt to get the job. And so when I applied for the job here in Teton County, it was a 7-member board, 5 were females. And I thought, oh boy, my chances have gone down. But fortunately, our board and just incredible women, they understand how important it is to support each other. And to, so I think in working with another strong leader, recognize what they bring to the table that is different, and leave them to it. Have the trust and the faith, and then constantly, even when I disagree with the direction that we're going, I'm constantly cheerleading and saying from the sidelines, in front of their face and behind their back, that is an awesome idea. Let's give it a shot. How can I help? What can we do differently to make sure this terrific idea goes forward? So I just try to promote them at every chance I get, and realize that we are in it together, and there's no way that we will be able to sell this pie if we are not in it together. So that's been my approach. Works most of the time.
I've joined in, ladies, to let you know that we need to start wrapping this up. Thank you so much for being here. We have so many amazing questions. We're actually compiling these questions because this could be a series of conversations. I'm so appreciative to all the audience members who have submitted questions. They're really thoughtful and thought-provoking. I want to thank all of you so much for your time. If you wanted to say anything before exiting, Melissa or anyone.
I would just say thank you to the panel, and thank you to the audience. It's hard to choose the best questions to ask. They're all amazing, and I would love to keep these ladies for hours, but unfortunately I can't do that. So thank you to the audience, and thank you to the panel. It's been a great discussion, and thank you to Womentum for allowing me to facilitate today.
Melissa, Allie, Jody, Gillian, and Susan, thank you so much for donating your time. You absolutely are inspiring women, and I'm so grateful to have you here today. Thank you very much.